Heyo, my name's Mason. I'm a musician, composer, and music educator, and I'm here to tell you why Forever Fugitives from Final Fantasy XIII is actually about trains. Forever Fugitives is one of my absolute favorite pieces of music ever. It was written by Japanese composer Masashi Hamauzu for the Final Fantasy XIII soundtrack and appears about twice in the game if I'm not mistaken. A lot of people didn't really like how linear Final Fantasy XIII was, but I think everyone can agree that the music is absolutely masterful. I'm a huge Hamauzu fan, and I think he absolutely knocked it out of the park with this one. That being said, let's go ahead and jump in. Let's break down the elements that make this short piece of music so special. From the very beginning, percussion drives this piece forward. A tasteful little timpani roll brings us in before the snare drum introduces the rhythmic feel for this section. Ultimately, the rhythm is just continuous 16th notes, but because of the meter and the way that the beats are emphasized, see, I wasn't lying to you. And there's still even more track for this train analogy to run on. Get it? All jokes aside, this train-like snare drum feel provides a ton of forward momentum, which is nicely aided by the repeated eighth notes in the cellos. But not only that, the odd metered time signature aids us here as well. Instead of 4 beats per bar, we have 5, in this case being broken up into 3 beats, then 2. Those last 2 beats really want to push to the next measure, creating this continuous propulsion and forward momentum. Now moving from rhythm to harmony for a bit, throughout this opening section, the strings provide us with some simple but gorgeous swells harmonized in minor thirds. In addition, this harmonic phrase stretches across 2 measures instead of just 1. This creates another layer above the rest of the rhythm below, and even provides a different source of momentum with the push and pull of the dynamics. The last thing I'll mention for this section are the melodic fragments we hear in the brass. Now, I think there's room to argue that this first phrase was possibly derived from the Promise theme, but it's not the clearest connection. However, the second interjection is definitely pulled from the battle theme, Blinded by Light. The next section is a transition point that can be broken into 2 different parts. The first one stops everything cold in its tracks. Okay, I'm done now. All of the percussion and brass cuts out, and suddenly we are left with just Masashi Hamauzu and his painfully beautiful string harmonies. And I said painfully on purpose, because this melody comes right out of another piece on the soundtrack entitled Atonement. Definitely doing a video on that one later. The next section immediately puts us back on track. What? I wasn't even making a joke that time. The percussion and brass abruptly interrupt this moment of peace. The timpani and snare drum have a little duet time, messing around with our new 6/4 time signature that was introduced at the top of this transitory material. Meanwhile, the low brass and French horns sit on a violent F-sharp sustain. Now there's something special about this F-sharp. Can you figure it out? What does it sound like? A freaking train horn, man! It's just blatant now. But that sustain and the little cymbal roll take us out of the transitory material and into the next section. Now this next section, I've said that word a lot in this video, is my absolute favorite part of this track. It could be considered just another interjection of transitory material, but I think it's distinct and substantial enough to be identified as the B section, despite its brevity. After the train horn, we suddenly open up into this gorgeous trumpet solo, quoting the Promise theme from the very beginning of the game. And I have to say, the soloist puts so much emotion and finesse into this short melodic phrase, it's absolutely incredible. Following this initial call out of the Promise theme, the rest of the orchestra answers in kind, taking that melody and running with it. You gotta hear this. And thus, we arrive once more in familiar territory. The train rhythm in the snare has been restored, we have our minor third swells in the strings again, and the brass interjections from the beginning once more return. But this time, the strings continue to quote the Promise theme over and over again, almost as if reminding the player and the characters of the promises they've made and are bound to keep. Before all this is said and done, we get one more quote of the Atonement theme in the horns, and one final F-sharp pedal as the timpani mimics what sounds like a machine almost breaking down, an unresolved ending for Fugitives forever on the run. Now, all this being said, I obviously know that this piece is not literally about trains, as much as it kind of sounds like it. It has a very clear title and was written for the game that it appears in. However, I do think this piece sits in the realm of musical metaphor, using sounds and techniques that are recognizable to a lot of people to evoke the correct emotions for the scene. Thank you so much for coming along on this journey with me, exploring one of my favorite pieces of music from my favorite soundtrack of all time. If you enjoyed the video, you know which buttons to press down there. If you're not aware, I also write my own video game music that can be found on this channel if you're so inclined. And with that, I bid you a good day. Catch you in the next one.